Secretary Roger Millar of the great state of Washington. Welcome to InfraTalk America, and thank you for taking the time.
Good to be here.
Looking forward to this conversation, very much so. Your history is impressive in the context of contributions to the transportation system, infrastructure, and all that goes with it. Can you give us a little bit of your background in this context? I know you were named Deputy Secretary in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And not very long before you became Secretary.
February of 2016.
February of 2016.
Acting, correct.
And one of the hallmarks of that period, because it was the period I served at the Federal Highway Administration, was Big Bertha. So as a new incoming deputy and then secretary, Big Bertha was an underground tunneling machine that was being utilized to on the Alaska Way Viaduct project. And can you can you tell me your experience approaching this job with a project like that and the circumstances that you found yourself in?
Well, mega projects are not unique to the Washington State DOT. We are committed to doing big things. And, going back to Galloping Gertie, the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, or our floating bridges that sometimes don't, we have a history.
And both those bridges made the Guinness Book of World Records.
Well, yes. But, during my tenure, one of the first things I did as secretary was cut the ribbon on the 520 floating bridge and accept the certificate from Guinness for being in the record as the longest floating bridge in the world. We actually own and operate 4 of the 5 longest floating bridges in the world, including the longest floating bridge over salt water. The other bridge in the top 5 is in Georgetown, Guyana. So
wow.
Something that we have in common with Georgetown. But we were doing the longest floating bridge in the world. At the same time, we were building the largest diameter deep bore tunnel in the world and reconstructing a 6-lane interstate over a mountain pass that gets tens of feet of snow every year. And that's what we do. It's what we do, and we do it pretty well. The problem with Bertha at the time was that it was not moving. And
stuck underground. We were in court with the contractor, a suit that we ultimately prevailed in. But the machine was repaired by the contractor. They drilled down to it, dug down to it, hauled the front of it out, fixed it, put it back in, took off running. Should have been walking, but they took off running, and immediately a sinkhole developed right behind the machine that came all the way up to the surface. So we stopped them for cause just before the machine was to go under the viaduct. And the viaduct was damaged in an earthquake and was in a state of disrepair. It was safe, but the thought of tunneling under it, coming as close as a couple of feet to the bottom of the pilings after the sinkhole and all the rest of it, there was a growth opportunity, professional growth opportunity for me, because when my team said the machine is functioning properly, they're operating it properly, they have safety procedures in place, Mr. Secretary, you have the choice to tell them to go ahead. And the option to going ahead was filling up the hole after spending years and hundreds of millions of dollars. So yes, go. And from that go decision, it was seamless from there to the end of the project. Bertha is now in little pieces. Most of a tunnel boring machine is machinery that you reuse somewhere, but the cutting head itself, it was scrapped. And so I have a little piece of it on my bookshelf at home, and a lot of other people do. The tunnel's open. The viaduct has been torn down. We've rebuilt the waterfront. It's a phenomenal project because it addresses the need to move cars and trucks. It also opened the waterfront up, reconnected Seattle with its waterfront for the first time since, before World War II, created an incredible urban space. and just been a win all around.
I liken it. I'm a New Englander, and I liken it to the Big Dig in Boston. Notwithstanding the history of it and the cost, I think it was originally estimated at $2 billion, ended up at 14. Mm-hmm. The payback on that investment has been huge for Boston, for the region.
Yeah.
So big projects result in big returns.
Yeah.
But in the case of your project,
let the record reflect that our budget was $3.1 billion, and we delivered the project for $3.5, including a 3-year delay. And the property along the old viaduct, when we tore it down, the appreciation of the value of that property was $11 billion.
Isn't that amazing? Well, I love that story, and it's a great example of what state DOT secretaries have to deal with. I mean, that was a huge decision. It could have gone south a number of ways.
Yeah, well,
but you've got to make those decisions.
The unofficial motto of our agency, Greg, is you can't make this stuff up. You never know. I when I go to sleep at night, I know what's on my calendar for the morning, but I don't know how my day's going to go. And it's tunnel boring machines, it's floating bridges, it's bridge failures, truck strikes, it's landslides, snowstorms. We actually had a canyon in eastern Washington that filled full of tumbleweeds during a windstorm and trapped like 24 vehicles. We had to go in and excavate the tumbleweeds out of the way and rescue those folks. So you never know. You never know what's going to happen.
Not too many people get training on that.
No, so they don't.
You kind of sort of have to figure it out as you go along.
Yeah.
Well, your storied career involves a number of levels, but as essentially a land use and transportation engineer and a national and international leader in the conversation about not only how to build, but where to build and what to do. And, obviously the sort of general mantra is state of good repair, that your existing infrastructure takes priority. But you're really taking to another level how you think state DOTs need to approach decision-making on what to invest in, the expansion of alternative transportation. Can you just give us a sense of what, when you became president of AASHTO, and you're now at this meeting, ending your one-year term as AASHTO, and when you began your term, as is traditional with new presidents of AASHTO, you established some they call emphasis areas. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it sort of captures your sort of governing philosophy about how state DOTs and the nation ought to approach investment and maintenance and construction of infrastructure.
Well, sure, I'd be happy to. And I'm what some people call a plangineer, in that I'm a land use planner, a transportation planner. I'm also a registered, professional engineer in civil engineering. And when I got to the role of CEO and started working on a strategic plan for my agency, when I became involved in leadership at AASHTO, we worked on a strategic plan for the organization. And each of us as, when you become president, you get to offer emphasis areas for the year of your presidency, hopefully based on our strategic plan. So for me, it was resilience. And when you say resilience to a lot of people, they say, oh, he's going to go off on climate change again. And I'm like, resilience is about resilience in the face of climate change, but it's the ability to plan for and be ready to respond to whatever happens to the assets your agency is responsible for. So it can be resilience in the face of climate change, the fires, the flooding, the sea level rise that we're experiencing, but it's also natural and man-made disasters that have nothing to do with climate change. Cybersecurity, we had a security breach in our system just last week. It took all of our publicly facing stuff down for 3 days, and you have to be ready for that. And my team delivered. We got it all back up and running, and we got the word out to people while it was down. Need to be resilient in the face of. We have a Cascadia earthquake that's coming one of these days. There's going to be a 9.0 or greater on the Richter scale earthquake right off our coast. When that happens, we have to be ready to respond.
We also need to respond to our changing demographics. 25% of the people in Washington State don't drive a car. They're too young, they're too old, they're not able, they're not willing. In a few cases, we don't let them, but for whatever, that's 2 million people in Washington State that are my customers too, that are the agency's customers as well. So how do we serve that population, that growing population? Because as Washingtonians age, more and more of them are hanging up their car keys for the last time. How do you maintain your independence and your dignity and your quality of life in rural Washington or suburban Washington or downtown Seattle after you hang up the car keys for the last time? We have to be ready for that. And we also need to be ready to respond to changes in the state's economy and the nation's economy. You know, we're the home to several small businesses, Amazon, Boeing, Microsoft, you know, Starbucks coffee. You know, sometimes we're selling lots of planes, other times we're not. Sometimes it's all about computers. It's always about package delivery lately. But you know, when we built Interstate 82 in Eastern Washington, we didn't anticipate that Interstate 82 would be the conduit by which Washington's enormous wine industry exports its product. But that's how it gets there. You know, you have to be responsive. So we need to have systems that are safe and they're sound and they're smart. And that's what I've been talking about with AASHTO this year.
How are we doing on a national scale?
Well, on a national scale,
Preparing, getting ready.
Let's look at safety. You know, to be resilient, we need to have a system that is safe, and it's fundamentally not. If over 40,000 people die on it every year, you know, deaths are up 30%, pedestrian and bicycle deaths up 70%. The combined budgets of all 52 of our DOTs, the AASHTO members, the 50 states, Puerto Rico, the District of Columbia, is about $200 billion a year we spend on transportation. Safety crashes in the United States costs the country's economy $1.4 trillion a year. So if we were to spend more and focus more on reducing fatalities to zero, we could potentially save up to $1.4 trillion in societal cost. So that's the safety side. And then you've got asset management, which is the sound piece of being resilient. Our economy doesn't run on the infrastructure we wish we had. It runs on the infrastructure we take for granted every day. And what I have in Washington State is an $11 billion backlog just on pavement and bridges. And then I've got ferries and passenger rail and other things. But, you know, elected officials they like to make their constituents happy. And the constituents are happy with something new because they've already got that road. You know, they'll complain about a pothole in it, but they assume you've built it, it's going to be there forever. They're not going to be there unless we invest. And so we, as an organization, I as a secretary, we need to talk about preservation every chance we get. And then we need to be smart. Our population and employment grows 2 to 3% a year in Washington State. If everybody wanted to use a single occupant vehicle to get about their business, I cannot grow the transportation system 2 to 3% a year. I just can't do it. So, you know, using road expansion as a solution to growth, it's no longer on the table. It doesn't mean we don't expand some roads, but that strategy no longer works. You can't build your way out of congestion. So what we need to do is manage the situation. We need to apply technology to our roads. We need transportation system management and operations principles, smart roads. We have an express toll lane system on Interstate 405 where you can ride in the general purpose lanes or you can pay a toll to ride in lanes that are managed to be at least 45 miles an hour during, you know, the congested periods of the day. Or if you don't want to pay that toll, you can carpool with 2 of your friends and take that road for free. When we did that on I-405, it's a 10-lane highway, just like I-5 north of Seattle is a 10-lane highway. About the same daily traffic on the 2 highways, 110, 120,000 vehicles a day. Managing the lanes on I-405, we have 35% more throughput in the peak hour than on the unmanaged lanes on I-5. And we did that with cameras, and people pay for the privilege, some of them, or they carpool for the privilege.
building 35% more physical capacity. We didn't have the wherewithal. We didn't have the space. We don't have the air. We don't have the water. So let's be smart about it. Let's manage demand. On that piece of I-5, that congested piece of I-5, 2% of the vehicles in the morning rush hour are buses. And I regularly get complaints from people that I was stuck behind a bus. But the 2% of the vehicles that are buses are carrying 34% of the people moving in the corridor. So to be resilient, we need to be safe, we need to be sound, we need to be smart, we need to be able to articulate that to the people we work for, the people we serve, and that's what I've been trying to do in my role.
We have a focus on what we call our targeted technology sectors, one of which is digital project delivery, and the other that is subject of our current focus is sustainable composite structures. On the digital project delivery side, you had talked about the technology, and our focus isn't so much on what we build, but how we build it. How do we expand the effectiveness, the efficiency of delivering infrastructure projects? And the work that is going on across the country right now, there are a number of things, including the Everyday Count 6 initiative, which included an initiative focusing on e-ticketing and digital as-builts. Digital as-builts, open BIM, BIM for infrastructure. There's a lot of labels to it, but what it comes down to is the development of the capacity and the capability to utilize digital project delivery ultimately on a full scale. There's one of our sponsors, Trimble, did an analysis on a project in Norway. And Norway and Europe generally is several years ahead of us in adopting open standards and really creating the conditions where software developers can develop to a common standard, which means they can do it faster, they can do it in ways that'll be much more useful to the platform that the state DOTs provide. So a lot of that work's going on right now. And e-ticketing, which is one of our sponsors, Hall Hub's very deeply involved, and we helped organize a national e-ticketing task force that was specifically designed to mobilize support from the industry to support DOTs who had already decided to do it. 43 states actually signed up for e-ticketing for the EDC initiative. So it really was a condition that was driven by states. COVID, ironically, because immediately state DOTs were trying to find ways to get people away from one another, like we all were at the time. And so states reached out, collaborated. How do we find solutions that will eliminate this condition, not to mention the safety factor? You've got people at 1 o'clock in the morning in an interstate who are running around, moving equipment, climbing on trucks, handing off paper tickets and grabbing paper tickets. It was really a fairly untenable situation, and paper tickets are efficient as hell. So there's a safety factor, but mainly what you did is took paper tickets, and I've once said paper tickets are where data go to die. So not only do you have those sort of functional operational benefits, but you're converting what is going to be useless paper into digitized data, and that data becomes extremely valuable. We don't even know yet what that data is going to be used for in terms of advancing digital project delivery on a broader scale. We're already seeing examples of it. So the multiple AASHTO committees working on open data standards, a pooled fund study, I think 21 states involved. There are several states who are leading their own regional efforts, all aimed at figuring out how we develop, basically replicating what they've done in Europe. So that will help accelerate everything. So the role of technology in how DOTs have traditionally done their business and delivered projects, and your sort of observations, your own experience at WASHDOT and what WASHDOT is doing to sort of advance and accelerate the adoption of digital across the project delivery spectrum.
It has been transformative. When I think back, I've been at this about 45 years, and my dad was a civil engineer, so I've been around
construction for quite a while. I got out of college with my civil engineering degree, proud young guy. I was going to go change the world. I went to my first job at the city of Portland, Oregon, and they put me in a scale shack. And what I did was reviewed the ticket that the scale operator wrote and initialed it. I was a witness to this paper that I had to be by law because we were spending federal dollars. I graduated from being in the scale shack to being an inspector out in the field and taking the ticket from the truck driver. So I was the one that jumped up.
You were on the truck.
I was up on the truck with my steel-toed boots and all the rest of that. In the office, when we were doing design work, it was paper design. And what we've done with this whole digital delivery thing is we've gotten rid of paper. It's like you said, it turns data into information that you can use, you can store. You don't need a warehouse to store it. It's up in the cloud. And it gives you the option to do things differently. When I was doing design on paper, if somebody said, what would it look like if we moved the curb a foot? I'd say, let me get back to you in a couple weeks.
I was going to say, that'll take you a week or two.
Yeah, and now we can do it instantaneously, which saves us money, and it gives the opportunity to consider more options before you go forward. And this is all about options. So about the only paper thing left in my world anymore are deeds. I have to go into the office every couple of weeks to sign deeds with blue ink. Everything else is digital, and we're better for it.
It really is changing the landscape in exceptional ways, and I think the nature of the federal aid highway program, I guess as I want to frame it, is 52 individual institutions called state DOTs. And the program's defined in law as federally assisted but state administered, and that's something the states have jealously guarded for since the beginning of the program. It also arguably makes sense because the decisions that need to be made in the context of everything your state DOT does, including project delivery, the closer to the site, the closer to home, the better. So, but obviously, when you're looking at advancing and accelerating the deployment of innovation that might improve your processes or the advancement of technology, going door to door in 52 states is a daunting task. So, particularly if you're a private sector innovator and not a huge big company. It's challenging to make that work. So our overarching question that we've asked many of our guests is how do we move innovation in the Federal Aid Highway Program given those set of circumstances? We've got the Everyday Counts program we've talked about, and it's been a very successful collaboration between Federal Highway and states. Are there other successful approaches that you've experienced or seen or utilized at WASHDOT?
Well, that's why AASHTO exists. We've been accelerating innovation for 108 years and counting. My state is unique. I have very different problems from my colleague who's the secretary down in Puerto Rico, or my friend Ed who runs the Hawaii DOT. Different situations, but we also have a lot in common. Concrete's concrete, asphalt, steel. We're using a lot of common stuff. Composites.
That's
Yeah, absolutely. Composites. You got to put that bridge in a backpack in there somehow. Yeah, but
thank you for being the first state on the West Coast to utilize University of Maine composite technology.
We were happy to do that. But we come together as an organization. AASHTO comes together in large part to do it once. I mean, who won the VHS Betamax war? Everybody was VHS. Well, do you have a VHS at home anymore? No, it got replaced with compact discs, and those are obsolete now too. Yeah. So, but doing it once saves us all time and resources, and pooling our intellectual capacity, pooling our real life experiences that are there in our states, and appropriately so. Bringing it to the national level, we can nationalize what's appropriate to nationalize,
and have one product or one solution or one coding or whatever, and then build off of that.
Yeah.
That's the value of this organization.
My own philosophy, after I left office, I've supported an initiative that had been brought to the table by AART, to essentially repeal a rule that had been established in 1912. I can't remember the exact details, but effectively it really was a hindrance to state DOTs being able to sort of advance a certain innovation. And I look back on that, and I wrote I submitted a comments for the record as soon as I was able to do so. And in that statement, I basically said, I support the repeal of the rule, but it must be accompanied by a real commitment by industry, by contractors, by consulting engineers, anyone that's involved in advancing innovation. AASHTO has a program called the AASHTO Product Evaluation and Audit Solutions, and that program has been around for a long time. And it sort of serves as part of the technical services offerings of AASHTO. It sort of serves as a conduit to evaluate innovation and technology and provide sort of a central repository of information and data about that technology. And there's a whole process I won't get into, but it does exist. It's existed for a while. It's a very effective program, but it's very limited, largely due to resources. So I think there is an opportunity to explore how AASHTO could expand its role in sort of accelerating the advancement of innovation through a mechanism like that. But I think it's going to necessitate having industry much more involved in helping provide those resources. They have a relationship now. You buy services under this program, but I think it needs to be broader and more expansive. So you're exactly right. It's why AASHTO exists. It's the perfect place to have a conduit to accelerate ideas and innovation. And in the case of the private sector, partner with them and help advance those ideas, because the due diligence has got to be done at some level. Does it have to be done in 52 individual state DOTs, or is there, as they do so often, utilize AASHTO as that sort of central repository for that kind of information, and hopefully the result is accelerating the process of adopting some of those innovations?
Yeah, that's one of the values of AASHTO. And that conduit, it's been around for 108 years. It was a different conversation, before, we got into the digital space. And with the digital space, we're having those conversations amongst ourselves with industry and changing in response. What I like about it is that it's a measured response. I mean, we're looking to innovate, we're looking to go forward, but we're not going to chase every squirrel that comes in the yard. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's one of the other values.
My last question, I could do this all day, but I won't. My last question is, we talked about Everyday Counts, obviously a program that Victor Mendez and I are, to this day,
justly
continue to be proud of.
Yep.
Do you have a favorite EDC story or innovation?
Something that we did in Everyday Counts was convert our streetlights to LED. We developed a program, and we did the first 7 miles of the conversion as a part of Everyday Counts. And when we then took that and went statewide with it, paid for it with the energy savings.
I love that story.
And then as a part of the analysis, we turned a bunch of streetlights off that we found we didn't need. And communicating to people that you got a perfectly good street light out there. Why isn't it on? Well, because it doesn't need to be on. And again, saving us money, saving us sending people up to scary heights, because some of those interstate, they're big. But yeah, it's a great program, and it's just that example of a little innovative spark leading to a safer situation and a less expensive situation.
I've always said, particularly, I spent a lot of time on bridge matters, and bridge engineers are among the most conservative engineers. And I used to say often when I was speaking to bridge audiences in my former role, The last thing I want is a Cavalier Bridge engineer. But we have to continue to commit to and become and continue to be innovative. And even in something as critical as the bridge sector, and as and with good reason, lots of attention and due diligence paid to it, we have to continue to innovate. And that's probably the most challenging of the innovations, but that's what DOTs do.
Yeah.
And some do it more enthusiastically than others, perhaps. Some invest more resources in it because they can. But the investment of resources in innovation in a lot of the examples we've talked about today have a distinct payback. So I think, our audience, we're working to develop our policymakers in the states and the federal level. And my message to policymakers is constantly, when I have somebody like you at the other microphone, they need to be prepared to support the resources that state DOTs need to invest in workforce development, the expansion of innovation, the innovation and the technology that could potentially be a tool to attract some of that next generation workforce, because your father's DOT isn't going to cut it for them. The DOT you're leading now and advancing in the future will, potentially. And workforce is a desperate challenge for all of you.
That's my hope. There are two things I do not do as Secretary of Transportation. I don't appropriate money, and I don't set policy. That's done by elected officials, as it should be. I am a subject matter expert to those elected officials. I let them know my views, and then they tell me what to go do, and I go and do it. But they're hearing from a lot of other people as well. And they need to be hearing from the DOT. They need to be hearing from our partners in industry. Those conversations are important.
Well, and it's something that you've done very well, and you've become a national and international leader in several areas surrounding the vast and important responsibilities of departments of transportation in this country. So thank you for your service and your friendship, and please continue the good work. And enjoy your retirement from the presidency of AASHTO. I know it's going to save you
I'll have a little more time.
Significant time that you'll fill with something else.
Well, I have this day job. I mean, I do this, but, running the DOT, serving the 7,000 people who work with me at the agency, that's the most important thing, and that's where I spend most of my time. And this is just an honor to have done, and I've loved it, and I'm looking forward to handing the keys over to Craig Thompson here on Thursday.
Well, congratulations on a very successful year as AASHTO president. Again, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.